It's almost like the computer was listening to me. So I was over here talking to Jonathan. If you're just tuning in, we've been doing some backup DPLs because, you know, the show runs Monday through Friday now on broadcast TV. And what if something happens? You know, what if the computer breaks? What if we take a power hit and it has to reboot, which takes about 5 minutes with this computer? And because there's a little gerbils inside of it running around to power the thing. So I was just talking about, boy, maybe we need to upgrade to a better computer. And then once I did, it just started flashing the black. It's like a Stephen King novel. I mean, I was waiting for it to open up and envelop me and swallow me and take me in, because it started to just go crazy when I said we're going to get a new computer. It's like Christine. So if you're familiar with Stephen King, you probably know Christine. That's exactly what it was like. Holy cow. Okay, so we are going, yeah, it took a while, Carol, because this computer would not reboot. It's a 5-minute reboot, and then it started flashing like crazy, and then the words came up, Dennis, you will die. I mean, I don't know where the heck that came from, but all I did was say, maybe we need a new computer, and then everything just went, so, so anyway. Yeah, well, I'm in for Jason today. It's not going to be a habitual thing. No, not squirrels on a hamster wheel, hamsters on a hamster wheel, right? Yeah, I guess that's true. I shall not, Pamela, you're correct. I shall not taunt the computer, because if I do, look what happens. So you got to remind me on tomorrow's DPL, we have to put the Eric Waxler video in, and we have to run the open. And other than that, I think it's okay, but it's just going to be me for 30 minutes because the graphics were not working. So, so what we're doing, if you're just tuning in, if the computer breaks, if something happens, if there's a power hit, if I'm off, eventually Shay and Greg and Allie and Jason will all be trained to do DPL. And because it would then be ABL and JAL and SRL and GDL. So they'll all be trained, but the only person right now is GDL. Greg D is trained to do this, and he did a stupendous job on DPL, because the Facebook thing anybody can do. Well, anybody can do it, what I do, regardless. But there is a little bit of a learning curve. So on this show, when it runs on broadcast, we have this button to run all the commercials. So the commercial breaks usually are run by someone in master control, and they're watching. And then when the show goes to break, they take it and they run it, and then it comes back. Not anymore. I press this button whenever I want to, and it goes to commercial break for a 90-second commercial break, which shows up in this computer over here. And this computer over here has a countdown on how long the break is going to be, and it counts me down until I know that I'm back on TV. Then we change sources, which is now working. If you were watching the previous stream, it wasn't working. But for you guys, it was working. Well, now they are seeing the changes. So, and correct, Pamela, and no religion, because this has been advertised as a religious program and an inspirational program on cable. However, it's changed. It no longer says religious programming, but it does spell my name wrong. It has Phillips. You'd think Dennis with one N. I get that misspell. It had Dennis right, but it had Phillips wrong with 2 L's. And they misspelled meteorologist. So there's that as well. We're looking. See, on this computer right now, the one that this is broadcasting on just came up with a Java update. Click here to continue. See, this is my point. So when all of this is running on a computer, it's awesome when it works, and I'm okay with this platform. We just have to have a backup in case it blows up, which it can and will, because we all know PCs are going to blow up at times. And when there's a backup, or when there's a blow up, these shows that we're doing tonight and that I've done one in the previous weeks will run instead until we get this back up and running. So that's kind of where we are. All right, so for whatever reason, Anna Maria is talking to Bridget that she met George Hamilton. I don't know why they're talking about George Hamilton, other than maybe because I'm so tan right now after spending the weekend at the beach. Yeah, that was Bridget. Bridget was being a Weisenheimer, making fun of my tan, and saying George Hamilton. So I get it. I got a serious tan working here. We spent Saturday on the softball field. You guys probably read Ryan's last travel softball tournament. She's gonna, at least for the time being, gonna focus all on drama and theater and singing and Broadway. She loves all that stuff, and she's good at it. So she's good at softball too, but that's what her passion is right now. So we'll see if it changes. So this Thursday, be there or be square, Clearwater Threshers game, 6:30 first pitch. I'm throwing out the first pitch at 6:20. Ryan's singing the national anthem at 6:23. She just, here, you know what? So I recorded her singing. No, I'm not going to do it. Not going to do it. But she sounded really good. And so I recorded her singing this today because she was practicing a little bit. And here, listen. Maybe I'll do this just for a second. She would yell at me, but she's not watching. All right, let's see. And it's good anyway. Hold on. All right, and then, but this is what's going to happen. Okay. This was just a practice. Okay, that's a little tease. So anyway, that's Ryan practicing her national anthem that she is singing at the Threshers game on Thursday. So I'm biased, I know, but I think she sounds pretty good. All right, but you know, she's never sung in a stadium before with a microphone, with the, you know, the echo-y kind of a thing. So, you know, who knows? I'm sure she'll be fine, but I'm sure she'll be nervous, but her softball team is going to be on the field with her to give her moral support. And, you know, I think it'll be fun. And I went out and I took out Josh, my son Josh. We went out. I haven't thrown a baseball, maybe a couple months, 6 weeks. And just wanted to go out, measured out 60 feet, 6 inches. And this is the dilemma I'm facing. And by the way, this is not a current weather chat. We're going to start recording the weather hit coming up in a minute. So I measured out 60 feet, 6 inches. And here is my dilemma. I can easily soft toss 60 feet, 6 inches, no problem. And that's what most people do. They'll go out and they'll throw it, you know, and whatever. I don't want to do that. So I'm old now, so I certainly can't throw like I used to. But I threw 4 pitches at pretty solid speed. And the harder you throw, the more likely you are to bounce something in there. 3 of them were strikes, 1 I bounced. I mean, not a horrible bounce, it bounced just in front of the plate. But to quote Dave Wills, a friend of mine who passed away a few years ago, former voice of the Tampa Bay Rays on radio, when you throw out the first pitch, you don't ever want to bounce it. So I'm torn. Do I just throw a nice soft toss and don't worry about it and it'll get there and no pressure? Or do I try to bring a little something to it with the possibility that I would bounce it, but it would have a little speed to it? So I don't know. I'm still torn. I may not decide literally until I get there. No. Jamil, absolutely not. That is a daughter thing. I have 6 kids, all right? I have 6 kids, and so as a dad of 6 kids, I'm allowed to say this. And in my opinion, the drama is much higher with my daughters than it ever was with my sons. Just saying it. Doesn't love them more than anything in the world, but I'm just saying there was more drama with my daughters than with my sons. And I think I'm allowed to say that. So anyway, okay. So Warren thinks I should just go ahead and throw it. You know, I mean, I'm going to. I know I will. You know, there's no way I'm going to soft toss it. I will tell you, what shocked me, when Longo, Evan Longoria, they retired his number at the Trop, not the Trop, at Steinbrenner a couple weeks ago, he soft-tossed it. That shocked me. And we all know he could still, I mean, he just retired. He could still play if he wanted to. So he clearly can throw it. But it surprised me a little bit because I just figured an ex-athlete would get out there and, and Kevin Cash, I think, was actually catching him. I just kind of thought he'd give a little something. But he actually really soft-tossed it. And I was kind of surprised by that. And I go, well, if it's okay for Longo, it's okay for me. But no, I'm sure I'll get out there and I'll tear my shoulder and whatever, but it'll be worth it if I throw a strike. So, all right. So anyway, let's go ahead and get back to where we are. One more segment, and we're going to talk surge, winds, and it might appear redundant because we've already done 2 of these, but we have one with each different background. One with one DPL plus, one with CMK, one with generators and whatnot, different sponsors. I want to have a backup, so it'll be for the right date. All right? So we're about to start again, and we're going to be talking surge, and we're going to be talking, actually, freshwater flooding, wind, as opposed to surge. And we're going to start, well, let's see what time. I got to pick up the time. So let's start at 20:30, which means I'm out at 26:30. 26:30. Okay, here we go.
Streaming from the ABC Action Weather Center in Studio A, this is Dennis Phillips Live Plus. Brought to you by CMK Construction, crafting Tampa's most exquisite bathrooms and kitchens.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to DPL Plus. Very nice to have you here. I will tell you, we're coming up on, obviously, the heart of the hurricane season. And we've been talking quite a bit about recapping the 2025 season. And, as I look at your, the folks who are here online, as always, because remember, you can watch DPL on the spot, Tampa Bay 66, and then you can also follow along online, and that's how our Q&A goes. And we've been doing this for, the longest time in terms of the interaction, because that's what makes our show a little bit different. And in my mind, I think that's what makes it more entertaining, because you guys pretty much run it. I mean, you take the direction in which we go based on your questions, based on your comments, and I have a tendency to just go in whatever direction you take me. Now, when Greg fills in and does GDL, Greg is a very regimented guy. Everything's in order, everything's set up perfectly, and his shows are awesome, and there's never any whatever direction that goes. I am the complete opposite of that. I don't plan in advance. I just start talking about stuff, and hopefully you guys take over, and you have never let me down. So as we get into the heart of hurricane season, we remember last year, Helene and Milton, and those were 2 completely different setups. We had, 2025, we had everything. We had the surge from Helene, but it didn't have a lot of wind and a lot of rain. With Milton, we had no surge across most of the Bay Area. It was all wind and rain. And the flooding with the surge, remember, storm surge is flooding water that comes in from the Gulf. It is Gulf water. It is water from the Gulf. Freshwater flooding is rainfall. That's all it is. And when you get 2 feet of rain, and this is what happens. When you have an onshore flow, when a hurricane comes in, water is already pushing in. So it's coming in off the Gulf. It's pushing in to the bay and to canals and whatnot. So when you get all this rain that falls, as much as 2 feet of rain, that rain tries to drain into the canals, into the rivers, into the bay, and go out into the Gulf. Well, when you have an onshore flow pushing up against it, that rain cannot drain and we have flooding. And that's what happened with several of our storms over the years. With Milton, interesting. So every now and again, and even with Irma, you guys remember with Irma when the bay drained? The bay drained. If you weren't here, we had an offshore flow and all the water drained out. Well, ironically enough, we had so much rain at that point, but because we had an offshore flow, the water actually could drain, and we did not have nearly the flash flooding with Irma that we've had with other storms when we had an onshore flow. So there's all these variables that come into play, whether the wind is onshore, whether the wind is offshore, how far offshore is the center. Helene, the storm was over 100 miles offshore. So the surge that we had, which was about 6 feet, still could have been a heck of a lot worse if it had been closer. The Hurricane Center was saying worst case scenario was a 10 or an 8 to 12 foot surge. That was a surge that would have occurred if that storm had made landfall in the Bay Area. But because it stayed offshore, we had a 6 to 7 foot surge. And when we come back, I'll show you a graphic about that. But ultimately, Helene's biggest threat was surge. Milton's biggest threat was wind. Most of us had 75 to 90 mile an hour winds. And those were gusts, by the way. That's Category 1 hurricane. So even though it was a Cat 5 at one point, remember Milton had winds of 185 miles an hour? We still only had maximum sustained winds in our area of hurricane force, barely hurricane gusts and sustained winds of tropical storm force. So we have been even as bad as Helene was with horrific flooding, but it could have been a lot worse if that storm was closer. We're going to talk more about surge, and I'll be answering more of your questions because we do have a lot of them here, and that's coming up as DPL continues. We'll be back in 90 seconds. Okay, so now we're going to go back and show this graphic that we showed last time, but you could not see it, so now we will show it. I'm going to put a pause point in here. So this is 3 foot. Okay. Why is it not letting me put a pause? Now this computer is acting funky on me. What in the world? All right, there's that one. And then, wait a minute, hold on, stand by. There's a pause, and here, I'll let you see what I'm doing here. Pop it over here. Okay, there is a pause at 3 feet. Now let's put a pause at 6 feet. And then put a pause at 12 feet. Okay. And we'll use a different graphic than we used last time, although you couldn't see the ones last time, so it's a moot point, right? Okay. All right. So let's go back. This was another 6-minute hit. We'll come in at 28. We'll be out at 34. 9:34 out. Okay, for my producers out there watching, because you guys have been helping me, thank you. A 9:34 out time. All right, so let's start with full screen, and we will take this one. All right. Well, yeah, Charlotte, not really sure where that legend came from, I'll be honest. That came from our weather provider, I think. All right, 3, 2. How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Dennis Phillips Live. We are talking tropics, we're talking surge, we're talking wind, we're talking evacuations. And let's jump right into it. One of the questions that we get often is, in the Bay Area directly, what months are our biggest threat? Well, if you look overall, obviously June and July, you don't get a lot of storms. Even in August, there's a decent number of named storms, but the majority of them are still out in the Atlantic and stay offshore. Not always. There's always exceptions to the rule. But if you look historically, it's September and October, especially for the Gulf, October, when we really have to be most concerned, because what will happen is a storm will come in from the Caribbean, the Western Caribbean, and as we see a La Nina again developing this fall, when you see a La Nina, that often means the Western Caribbean is more active. If the Western Caribbean is more active, quite often a storm will be drawn northward toward the poles, and at that point, you have a storm approaching. If it went straight north, it would go right in the panhandle. Sometimes they veer a little bit left for certain reasons, which would take it more to Louisiana, Alabama. Sometimes they're drawn more toward the east, and they would go more toward Florida. It depends on what's happening that particular day in terms of those weather features. But with Helene, storm surge was by far the biggest threat. Now, there was the concern that surge would be a big threat for Milton as well. Remember, that storm was coming in right from the south. And then last second, it literally made a 90-degree right turn and went into Siesta Key. For a period of 2 or 3 hours, Jason and Greg and I are looking at this, and at that point, you throw the models out the window and you look out the window. And that's what I always say, because models are simply not going to be able to handle wobbles. They just don't. You just look at it. And we saw a storm that was going north and looked like it would be a worst-case scenario going into Pinellas or Pasco County. And it literally was going up, and it went to here, and it just went boom, made a right turn. I guess for your camera, for your screen, it would be this way, a right turn. Right in Siesta Key. If that had gone another 60 or 70 miles north, we would have had surge, and it would have been a much bigger issue, Milton, because we would not only have the winds of a landfalling hurricane and the rain of a landfalling hurricane, we would have a surge of the landfalling hurricane, which we did not have with Helene. Again, Helene's surge stayed off. Well, the surge went onshore, but we're looking more at a, my phone was ringing, so that's why I just hit the wrong button. But I'm not going to answer right this second. I hit the wrong button because Ryan's calling me, and I normally answer when Ryan calls, but I'm in the middle of this segment, so I want to make sure we continue to go. Actually, never mind. Hold on. I will answer in a second. Hello, I'm doing DPL right now, believe it or not. So I'm going to continue. So how was the movie? Did you guys, how was the movie? Was it good? Did they like it?
Hi.
Hi, sweetie. How was the movie? Did you like it?
Yeah, it was good.
It was good.
I almost cried.
Oh, you almost cried at the movie? Aw.
It was a sad.
It was a sad movie? Okay, okay. She went and saw an anime movie tonight. It was sad. Okay, well, I'm still on DPL right now, but I just want to make sure you're okay. All right, I love you very much, and I will call you when I'm done.
Love you.
Okay, love you. Bye. Okay, that was my daughter, Ryan, which you guys know. Okay, so let's go back. So this is a look at the surge issues. Now, you've heard me say many times before, when the Weather Service issues a surge forecast, it is the most reasonable worst-case scenario. Helene was a perfect example of that. They had a surge forecast of 8 to 12 feet. In reality, we had 6 to 7 feet. If you were watching us, we said 6 to 7 feet. We showed the graphic from the Hurricane Center that said 8 to 12. We let everybody know that's the worst case and be prepared for that. But in our opinion, it would be 6 to 7 feet, and that's exactly what happened. So what is the difference? You're right, Jules. You always answer Ryan. We just do. So exactly, Anna Maria. She is DPL's little niece. So there is a 3-foot surge. Look at what a 6-foot surge is, which is what many of us had along the coast with Helene. Issues on the first floor, right? But when you go from a 6-foot surge to a 12-foot surge, 12-foot plus, that's when you are talking about total inundation. And if Milton, well, first of all, if Helene had made landfall on our coast as opposed to staying offshore, this is what we would have had. If Milton had stayed along the coast and made landfall, Newport Richey, areas around there, this is what we would have had. So it's impossible to say that we were fortunate, because there's no one who was fortunate along the coast with Helene. It was a devastating storm. But what we can say is it could have been worse and would have been worse if that storm had not stayed offshore and had made landfall along our coastal areas. So when we come back, we're going to talk more about the months in which these develop and why the months of the fall are much more of a risk for our area on the Bay Area as DPL continues. Okay, that was sloppy, but I'm going to go with it anyway because I just did not. I was thinking to myself, this is a recorded show that we're going to show. Would it be bad to answer Ryan? I'm like, no, because that's kind of what we do anyway. All right, so we are on a break, Charlotte. Thank you. That is correct. So we are now going to go back, and I want to show this graphic, which I just think I show it a lot. But again, this isn't going to run very often, hopefully, unless I kick the computer a lot. And if I kick the computer a lot, maybe it will. I hope it doesn't. I think we might need a new computer. But then we'd have to reprogram it, and that would be a bear. Okay, we're going to go back to using this graphic on where things form. I'm going to start it in August. No, I'm going to go to September. I'm going to go to September. All right, so next hit. This one. Was that my first hit? Yeah, that was my first one. So this will be my second. No, that was my second. The voice of God, Jonathan talks. That was my second. Thank you, Jonathan. So I will go 9:36, which means my out is 9:41:45. 9:41:45. Okay, see? Jonathan's in there paying attention. Okay. All right, any other questions? Later this week, Christine, I promise you I will post it. Okay. I'm going to mention that one comment because it made me laugh. Okay. How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Dennis Phillips Live. Thank you for your comments, as always. They always crack me up. So Pamela said her friend in Pittsburgh says her favorite name in Florida is Alachua. I don't know why. Maybe she's a Gator. Because I used to work in Gainesville. I worked in Gainesville for 3 years in Alachua County. And I did not go to UF, but I was working at Channel 20. A lot of people worked at Channel 20. Nadine Yanis, our weekend anchor, she worked at Channel 20. I know there were lots of other people that worked. There was an anchor who worked at Channel 20 for like 40 years. Paige Beck, she was there when I got there in the late 80s. And I don't know how, I don't know if she's still working or if she retired, but she was there for like 40 years. So if you're from Gainesville, I'm sure you know Paige Beck. She was there forever. But DPL, yes, this is DPL Plus. Runs on Wednesday nights, sometimes other nights. It just depends if the computer's working. But running a DPL Plus, we often have special guests like Nadine or like Wendy or like other folks, a lot of our anchors, a lot of reporters who share maybe some of the stories they've been running. But tonight, we wanted to do a plus more on hurricane season and kind of an overview as we get into the fall months. So let's go ahead and jump in. This is a map I have shown you a lot, but for the new folks, I will continue to stress this point. This is the month of September. Historically, the peak of the hurricane season is September 10th. That is historically what it is. Now you look at these numbers over here, and these numbers show you the number of named storms per 100 years. So that's how many named storms, how many tropical storms have formed in the last 100 years. Look at the red area. The point I bring over and over again because I think it's really important. The highest number of Atlantic storms have stayed offshore. So when we're talking about storms way out in the Atlantic and you show these people who inevitably will show you the worst case scenario that brings a Cat 15 hurricane directly into us because one model might show it and the other 17,000 don't, but they will show the one model because I don't know why they show it, I'll be honest. Why? Why would you show the one model? I mean, are you being like the Hurricane Center where you're saying the worst case scenario? Are you really doing a service That would be my point. Here we go on a tangent. But are you really doing a service if you're showing the model that is so unlikely that you're not going to react to it and not going to do anything? Does it help you prepare? I don't know the answer to that. That's up to the individual person. But my take is, why would you show that worst case when you don't think it's going to happen? The reality of it is you do not think it's going to happen, but you show it anyway because it's sexy. And that's the only thing I can say about it. That's the only way to describe it. Because people will look at it. If it's a giant, massive hurricane, it's going to get people riled up. But are you really doing, are you going to say, oh, yeah, I'm doing that because I'm trying to prepare people? Are you really? Are you really? I don't know. That's just my take. Anyway, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. That just came to mind, as I often do. All right, so September. The month of September shows the majority of these storms come offshore. But there is a little bullseye that goes into the Panhandle and into Alabama and Mississippi, and that's more than likely late in September. Why do I say that? Because as we get into the hurricane season, the Western Gulf gets, or rather the Western Caribbean gets more active late September into October. And it does for the obvious reason that you have a developing system in the Western Caribbean, because that's where the water is the warmest in October and late September. So when you have a storm that develops in the Western Caribbean, it probably is going to go one of these three ways: Louisiana, the Panhandle, or our area. And the last major hurricane to hit the Bay Area directly, and when I say the Bay Area, I mean the Bay Area. Milton, I still argue that Milton did not hit the Bay Area directly because it hit Siesta Key. And I would argue Siesta Key, and I love Siesta Key, but I would argue that Siesta Key is not the Bay Area. It's Sarasota area. But that's just me. I mean, regardless, the last major hurricane to directly hit the Tampa Bay area is the Tarpon Springs hurricane of 1921. So anyway, at the end of the day, surge is still the biggest concern for our coastal areas, and wind is our biggest concern inland. And we'll talk about both of those as DPL continues. I came out 30 seconds light. So, because I thought I wrote 9:41:15, but instead I wrote 9:41:45. So this one needs to be 6:15. This show has been all over the place. So this one needs to be 6:15. So I will come in at 42:45, and I will be out at 42:45. So I'll be out at 49. 9:49 is my out when I come in at 42:45. And this is my last segment, right, Jonathan? Yeah. Jonathan's still there. Okay. So if you're just tuning in, we are recording DPLs in case something blows up on our PC and I can't be on TV, because we want to always be on TV. If I'm not on TV, if I'm not on Facebook, you guys are used to that. But if I'm not on TV, that's not a good thing. That's where advertisers are. So, all right, we're going on our last segment, which runs 6:15, out at 42:49, 9:49. All right, back again in 3, 2. Hi, everybody. Our last segment of DPL Plus. It is what we call, affectionately known as, our Heat Lightning Round, where I look and answer your questions and follow up on your comments. Barry, how you doing from St. Pete? Good to see you. We talk a lot about the threat of a hurricane. It so depends on where you live, guys. I mean, that, in a nutshell, if you live on the coast, and I'm talking, people ask me how much do I mean on the coast? I mean within a mile of the coast. If you live within a mile of the coast, your biggest threat on a Cat 3, lower than a Cat 3, will be the storm surge. It just will be. I'm broad brushing it, but this is the reality. Here, let me go ahead and call up a graphic and show you the different the different categories on this, because this will be helpful. Okay, so here's the scale. Let's go ahead and double box this here. Okay, so if you have a storm weaker than a Cat 3 and you're on a coast, surge is your biggest threat, because you can still, as Helene was the case, have a 6 or 7 foot surge. It can be devastating. If you live more than 5 miles inland, surge is not your issue. If you live on, and I'm talking inland from the bay or the Gulf, okay? If you live on a canal, you can also have surge issues. But if you are landlocked, so to speak, and you have no access to the bay or the Gulf, surge is not your problem for your home. So you can write that one off. If you have a Cat 3 or higher, as you see on the scale here, your biggest concern is within 5 to 10 miles of where that eye makes landfall. The eye is usually about maybe 10 to 20 miles wide, okay? It can vary. It can be smaller, it can be bigger, but that's an average, let's say. So 5 miles out from the center, from where that eye crosses, is where most of the extreme winds are going to be. So let's use Clearwater as an example. If a Cat 4 hurricane makes landfall in Clearwater, and you live in Tarpon Springs, you'll get hurricane force winds. You're 15 miles from the center, but you will not see the worst of the winds. And this is what I always say in terms of worst case scenario. There's a very small area that gets the worst of the winds. We're talking 5 miles. Andrew was a perfect example of that. Other areas, hurricane force winds usually extend 50, 60 miles out, sometimes less, rarely more. So you're going to have hurricane winds, but they're going to be Cat 1 hurricane winds. They're going to be much weaker. The extreme winds, the winds that do the most damage, and we're talking the structural damage, if it's a Cat 4 or 5, they're no more than 5 to maybe 10 miles out from the center. So when you're deciding how to handle evacuations, if you live on the coast, you're evacuating from the water. And I'm talking the surge, the Gulf water, not the rainfall. Evacuations from rainfall is extraordinarily difficult because we never know where the heaviest rain is going to set up. I would argue you cannot predict and not evacuate where rainfall flooding will occur, unless you live on a river, and then maybe you could, obviously. But if you're not on the water, a river, canal, the bay, the Gulf, you will not be able to predict where that heaviest rain is going to be, so it's just luck. It just is. And if you don't want anything to do with the storm at all, you evacuate and you get out. But if you're evacuating to avoid flooding, it's really only in those flood zones on the water, whether you're the Gulf, whether you're the bay, whether you're canals, etc., maybe even rivers. If wind is your concern, then you're not going to evacuate unless you have a strong Cat 3 or higher, unless you live in a mobile home. And if you live in a mobile home, you want to go to a shelter, even if it's a Cat 1. But if you're in a relatively structurally sound home, you're not going to evacuate on a 1 or a 2. You're not. You're going to hide from the wind. You're going to run from the water. But if it's a strong Cat 3, which as you see here is winds close to 130 or greater, then you're going to consider evacuating away from the path of that storm. What do I do? In the last minute of this show, I'll tell you what I do. If I see a storm coming in from the Gulf, I make 2 sets of hotel reservations for my family. One to the north, one to the south. And then I cancel that reservation. If it's within 24 hours, you don't have to pay a dime. In most places, check your website that you use. But if I see 2 or 3 days out and I know a storm is going more south, I'll send my family north, or vice versa. That's what I do. And we're not on the water. We're not in a flood zone. But if I know we potentially have a Cat 3, strong Cat 3 or stronger, and I want my family to leave, that's how I do it, especially because we have lots of pine trees and they could fall in the house. So I'll say this again. Hide from the wind, run from the water. If you're on the coast, take surge seriously. Anything more than 5 or 6 feet after last year, I think folks are going to evacuate. If you're inland, it's all about the wind. All right? So thanks for tuning in to DPL Plus tonight. As always, our crew will be here 24/7 if and when a hurricane threatens the Bay Area. You have a great night. Okay. So that is it. We did one of each. All right. Tomorrow night, DPL is regular. And maybe later this week I'll record another one. I don't know. But like I said, Thursday I am live. Hope you guys come out to see us at the Clearwater Threshers game. I'll be live and Shay's filling in for me. So one of these we'll have to use on Thursday. I guess the...
I have the CMA one cut and dumped already.
So that's the one we'll use. So we will use that one on Thursday, the first one we recorded, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then Greg will be in here the following week. So he will do DPL live, GDL rather, excuse me. Greg will do GDL live. And then hopefully I can get Shay and Jason and Allie coached up and ready to roll. So when they fill in for me, they will be ready to do DPL as well. So thanks for the questions. Thanks for hanging with me, guys. I think Nadine's going to record the news now, right? Or part of it?
About 20, 25 minutes, yeah.
Oh, are we on at 11 o'clock tonight?
Yes, nothing's pushing us back. It's 11:01:26, but we're not going there.
Okay, so we're on time. Jonathan, thank you very much, as always, for keeping up with that in the evening. I know on Sundays they're kind of used to just chilling and being like, we're good, and, just kind of hanging out or whatever. And then I come in, I'm like, no, we're going to record this, and let's record this, and let's record this. So it messed up their Sunday. But you know what? Tell Jason not to take off, and then it wouldn't happen. So, Jason Adams off this week. And apparently Jason Adams is also off in the middle of August as well. He's taken off another weekend. So you'll probably see me in mid-August as well, along with Shay and Allie and potentially Greg. Greg's in Boston this weekend, I think. Mm-hmm. And so Greg was in Boston, Jason's in Philly. They're doing the whole Freedom Trail thing, apparently. They're not, but, most people don't even know what the Freedom Trail is, I'm guessing, because I'm old and I do. But they're both in very important cities of the founding fathers of our nation. And I think Greg's back. Is he back tomorrow?
I believe so. I don't believe anything's wacky.
Let's look at the schedule, actually. I will look at... I always lose... Where's teams? Here we go. So Greg, tomorrow I will give you our shifts. Tomorrow, Greg is in. And Shay is off tomorrow. So Allie is working Shay's shift, and then I'm working. And then Shay is off on Tuesday. So Allie is working her shift, and Greg is in the morning. So Greg must be in town, back, I would assume. Yeah. And then Shay is off Wednesday, and Allie is in for her. Shay is back Thursday. I'm doing weather live, so she'll, from the Threshers game. So she'll be doing the 7, and then Friday we're all back, and then the following week I'm off. And that's my last PTO for the entire year, as hurricane season will be ramping up, and I will not have any PTO left. So, all right, you guys have a great night. Wait a minute, somebody asked a question. How many miles from the Gulf? Maria just asked how many miles from the Gulf. In what capacity was that question from? I don't know. Anyway, all right, guys. Jamil, I'll buy your ticket to go to the game, but you have to get airfare from Trinidad. Were you in Trinidad? Is that where you said you were? I think that's where you said you are. So yeah. So Jamil, I will buy, if you want to come in tomorrow, if you want to come in Thursday for the game, I will get you in, but you have to buy your ticket from Trinidad to actually get to the stadium. So that's on you. So anyway, you guys have a great night. Thanks for hanging with me and helping me out and giving me my time cues and everything else. And we will see you tomorrow night live at 7:30. Computer working and everything, as long as it does, we'll be back at 7:30 on our next edition of Dennis Phillips Live. You guys have a good night. Thanks.